today it's time for the last of the 1 steps, and it's 2B.5 using reciprocals to solve equations. So this one kind of goes along with our multiplication and division 1 steps that we learned about. It's just a different way to look at it. So if we're going to talk about reciprocals, the first thing we need to talk about is the multiplicative inverse property. It's very fun to say. Try to say it 5 times fast. Yep, that was hilarious. I can't really hear you in case you're scared. Anyway, the multiplicative inverse property says that when you multiply reciprocals, you always get 1. Okay? So for example, if you take 3/4 and you multiply it by its reciprocal, which the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3, you end up getting 1. And you can look at it 2 ways. You can say, well, 3 times 4 is 12, and 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 divided by 12 is 1. Or those 3's cross cancel and those 4's cross cancel, so you end up with 1 over 1, which is 1. So no matter how you look at it, when you multiply reciprocals, you get 1. And another example, this time I have a negative value. So when you have a negative value and you take the reciprocal, you still keep your negative value. And I'm going to put the 6 in the top and the 5 in the bottom. A negative multiplied by a negative is a positive, right? And if I say you're going to get 1, that means a positive 1, so you need to keep the sign. Because when you multiply the same signs, that is how you get a positive. So again, those 6's would cross cancel, those 5's would cross cancel. You're left with 1. When you see a whole number and I ask you for the reciprocal, remember -7 means the same thing as -7 over 1. So for our reciprocal, we can put the 1 in the numerator spot, the -7 in the denominator spot. When you cross cancel, you would still get 1. If this negative is confusing, think of it as if you took -7 times 1, that would be a -7. And 1 times -7 is also -7. And -7 divided by a -7 is 1. So this negative sign, whether you put it in the middle, the top, or the bottom, it doesn't really matter. When you multiply 2 negatives, you're going to get a positive. So anyway, why am I talking about this property? Well, understanding that property will actually help you solve equations that have fractional coefficients. So far, all the coefficients, those numbers next to letters that we've been dealing with in solving equations, have been nice whole numbers, or maybe even a decimal. We haven't had any fractions. One method to solving an equation with a fractional coefficient is to multiply both sides of the equation by the reciprocal. Because when we solved our multiplication equations, we ended up dividing the number by itself to get 1. For example, I'll kind of flip back really quick because I have these right in front of me. For this equation right here, I divided -11 by itself because that gave me 1x. So when you're solving this multiplication equation, you're really trying to get one of the variable, right? And when you multiply reciprocals, what do you get again? You get 1. So in looking at this, I have 3/8 h equals -9. If I want to get h by itself, and it's a multiplication equation, that means I need to get 1h, right? So if you take 3/8 and you multiply it by 8/3, won't those 8's cancel and those 3's cancel and you get h alone? Yes. So basically, whenever you see an equation where there is a fractional coefficient, so you can look at it as a fractional multiplication equation, all you need to do is multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient of the variable. That sounds so fancy. And you do it to both sides, and you can get the variable isolated. So over here, yes, 8/3 times 3/8 is 1, and 1 times h is h. You also need to take -9 and multiply that by the reciprocal as well. And notice we didn't change any signs. I need this to be a positive times a positive so I can get a positive 1. If I made this a -8/3, I'd end up with the -h, and you just want h. Okay, so with this problem here, I'm going to put this -9 over 1. I am a cross canceller, so I see this 3 and I see this -9, and 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into -9 -3 times. -3 times 8 is -24, 1 times 1 is 1, and when it's a denominator of 1, you don't need to worry about it. So h equals -24. When you go to check this, 3/8 times -24 should give you -9, meaning this. So to check it out, I'm going to put this over the 1. I would cross cancel this 8 with this -24. 8 goes into negative 24 negative 3 times. Negative 3 times positive 3 is a negative 9. So negative 9 does equal negative 9. We know that it's right. So it takes a little bit longer to check it, but it still works to check it. All right, take a look at this next one. I have negative 14 equals 2/3 x. Draw your line. This time, the x is on the other side. That's okay. It's a fractional coefficient. So this means 2/3 times x, right? If you multiply this by 3/2, the order that you multiply those three doesn't matter. So 2/3 times x times 3/2. When you take the 2/3 times the 3/2, you get 1. X is left by itself. If you multiply this side by 3/2, then you need to multiply this side by 3/2 as well. And when you do that, again, you have a whole number. Put a 1 under it. I see I can cross cancel this 2 and negative 14. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into negative 14 negative 7 times. And when we take 3 times negative 7, we get negative 21. I know you're thinking that too. 21. I can't take it. It's too much. 1 times 1 is 1, so I'm going to leave that denominator off. Because when your denominator is 1, it doesn't really matter. All right, next, I have a negative 4/5 x equals negative 8. And remember up top when I had negative 5/6, the reciprocal was negative 6/5? We didn't change that sign. Same thing here. If I'm multiplying by negative 4/5, that means I need to multiply by negative 5/4. So both sides, negative 5/4. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. And yes, those will all cross cancel to give x independence, solitude, all by itself. And when you take negative 8 times negative 5/4, I put the 1 there. First I see it's a negative multiplied by a negative. That means my answer is positive. And we can cross cancel this 8 and 4. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into negative 8, negative 2 times. Negative 2 times negative 5, positive 10. We already knew it was going to be positive, though, because when you multiply two negatives, it's positive. All right, last one of these. This time I put the negative fractional coefficient on the opposite side. That's okay. We're going to multiply by the negative reciprocal here. I guess it's not really, we'll talk more about negative reciprocals, but keep that sign the same, and you flip it. So the numerator is the denominator is the numerator. This negative times that negative gives us that positive. And after you cross cancel it out, it means a positive 1. Positive 1h is h. Since I multiplied this side by negative 5/8, I need to multiply this side by negative 5/8. So you can cross cancel, can you? No, there's no cross canceling with this one. So I have a negative multiplied by another negative. That means I'm going to get a positive. And 5 times 9 is 45. And 8 times 1 is 8. And that's improper. Improper is not okay. We want to be proper in math. So 8 goes into 45. Well, 8 times 5 is 40, right? So if 8 times 5 is 40, that means I would have 5 left over out of the 8. So h would equal 5 and 5/8. You are done with reciprocal coefficients. See you later.